Open the Old Testament, the book of Joshua. Chapter 6 describes an event that mainstream historians conveniently dismiss as mythology or religious allegory. Seven priests carrying seven trumpets march around the walls of Jericho for 7 consecutive days. On the seventh day, they circle the city 7 times, blow their horns, and the mighty fortifications crumble to dust. The conventional interpretation asks us to accept this as divine intervention, a miracle. But look closer at the numbers. 7 priests, 7 instruments, 7 days of preparation, 7 circuits on the final day. This mathematical precision doesn't look like a sacred ritual. It looks like a technical protocol. Frequency parameters, amplitude settings, conditions for achieving resonance. The physics behind this phenomenon is taught in every engineering school. When the frequency of external vibrations synchronizes with an object's natural oscillation frequency, resonant destruction occurs. The material begins breaking apart from within. No physical force required. Stone cracks, structures collapse, walls fall. If we accept this framework, the logic extends further. If sound energy can reduce fortress walls to rubble, that same energy can work constructively, shaping solid rock without tools, lifting multi-ton blocks without machinery, molding stone as if it were clay. Technology that sounds like science fiction, but explains what we see in ancient architecture. Low-frequency vibrations below 20 Hz fall outside human hearing range, yet they profoundly affect physical objects and living organisms. At certain parameters, infrasound shatters rock formations. At others, it induces unexplainable anxiety and hallucinations in humans. Weapon and construction tool operating in the same frequency band. Modern science acknowledges acoustic levitation as a real phenomenon. In laboratory conditions, focused sound waves suspend small objects in midair. Scale up this technology, and moving massive stone blocks weighing dozens of tons stops being a mystery. Let's travel to German lands, to the valley of a great river. The Rhine region is scattered with remnants of medieval fortresses. But these aren't simply structures damaged by time. This is total annihilation. Hundreds of castles reduced to piles of stone, as if some force swept through with a single purpose, erasure down to the foundations. The official explanation sounds simple enough: warfare, sieges, subsequent looting. Victorious armies supposedly dismantled captured fortifications methodically to deny their use to enemies. Military history records such examples, but the sheer scale here raises serious doubts. Consider the scope of work involved. Fortress walls 3 to 4 meters thick, constructed from stone blocks weighing several tons each. Towers rising to the height of modern 10-story buildings. Foundations driven deep into bedrock. All of them, this requiring manual disassembly, stone by stone. Now add context. An army has just completed an exhausting siege. Soldiers are fatigued, wounded, mourning fallen comrades. Supplies are depleted. Every man dreams of returning home to his family. And at this moment, command issues an order: dismantle these walls with picks and hammers. Work that would take months, possibly years. What's the motivation? The standard answer claims it prevented local populations from reusing the stone for construction. But this logic collapses under basic analysis. Building material lay everywhere in abundance: riverbeds, rocky fields, nearby quarries. Hauling multi-ton blocks down from hilltops where ruined castles stood to villages below, backbreaking labor with zero practical benefit. Yet amid this sea of destruction stands a solitary giant: Cologne Cathedral, a 157-meter colossus comprising 300,000 tons of stone spread across nearly 9,000 square meters. Undamaged, intact, functioning. Why did this one structure survive when everything surrounding it was ground to rubble? Perhaps it wasn't meant for destruction. Perhaps it was captured, repurposed, transformed into something entirely different. Whatever it originally was got hidden beneath the mask of a Christian temple. Take a map of German territories from the 15th century. Mark every destroyed Gothic structure. Now overlay it with a map of Great Tartaria from 1716. The border alignment is startling. All major Gothic buildings fall within territories that old maps designate as this empire's domain. Tartaria's western frontier ran along the Rhine. This precise region shows the highest concentration of destroyed tall structures. Cologne sits exactly on the dividing line, a border city, a strategic node. The pattern of destruction is telling. Specifically, tall elements were demolished. Spires, towers, anything reaching upward. Lower structures often survived. This doesn't resemble conventional warfare. This resembles infrastructure dismantling, as if someone systematically disabled communication towers, cutting the system off from its power source. Descend beneath the cathedral's foundation, and you'll discover an entire hidden world. Officially designated an archaeological zone, remains of Roman structures and early Christian churches. The underground space exceeds 4,000 square meters, not a basement, an actual subterranean city with numerous chambers and passages. Tour guides vividly describe a 5th century baptistry with distinctive octagonal layout. They point out cruciform structures with mosaic remnants. They showcase the burial of a noblewoman and an 8-year-old child, attributed to the Merovingian dynasty. Expensive grave goods supposedly confirm their royal lineage. This all fits into a neat narrative of successive temple generations, each larger than the last. A convenient version of raising no awkward questions, but examine the materials and construction techniques more closely. The masonry of these allegedly Roman ruins uses red brick. Yet Romans preferred natural stone, marble, travertine, volcanite. They rarely employed brick in major construction, and when they did, it looked nothing like this. Here, the brickwork appears flawless, as if built yesterday. The vaulted ceilings employ techniques that only became widespread well after the 5th century. The walls extend downward for dozens of meters. The visible portion is merely the tip of the iceberg. True depth remains unexplored. Excavations have stopped. The cathedral weighs 300,000 tons. How can such a structure be placed on remnants of ancient churches? From an engineering standpoint, this is absurd. A foundation supporting such weight must be monolithic, calculated for specific loads. The conclusion is obvious. Everything beneath the cathedral and the cathedral itself form a single unified structure. They were artificially separated in time. Lower levels got declared ancient ruins from various eras. Upper levels became a medieval temple. In reality, these are different floors of one building. Beneath the cathedral lie not churches but technical levels, utilities, resonator chambers, energy systems. All buried under clay layers 8 to 12 meters thick. Uniform composition, no household waste, no organic matter, no garbage. Where did all this clay come from in a city built of stone? Cologne was constructed from limestone and granite. Clay forms through soil decomposition. For such quantities to accumulate, soil would need to have been blasted into the atmosphere with tremendous force, mixed with moisture, and fallen back as mud rain. This is a catastrophe signature. Underground deposits reveal melted brick. Ceramic melts at 1200 to 1400 degrees. Ordinary fires reach 800 maximum. Some stone samples show vitrification, partial transformation into glass. Such temperatures occur only with plasma or thermonuclear weaponry. Surrounding the city are dozens of perfectly circular bodies of water. These aren't karst sinkholes. They're blast craters forming tactical patterns. Someone bombed the system. View Cologne Cathedral through the eyes of an acoustic physics specialist. Interior vault height reaches 45 meters. 10 would suffice for worship services. Narrow vertical spires rise above 150 meters. 30 would accommodate any bells. The intricate stone lacework conventionally labeled decorative. But what if these are sound wave diffusers? Hollow columns, buttresses with open passages, all functioning as resonant chamber systems. A Gothic cathedral's form is identical to a giant bell or organ pipe. Every structural element is part of an acoustic mechanism. Stained glass windows aren't merely ornamental. Colored glass of varying thickness transmits and reflects sound waves differently. These are frequency modulation membranes. Spires serve as waveguides directing acoustic energy upward and outward. The cathedral exhibits a phenomenon tour guides call accidental acoustics. Whisper a few words in one corner of the building, and they're clearly audible at the opposite end, 150 meters away. Sound doesn't scatter, it focuses. Acoustic concentration points are calculated to centimeter precision. This is no architectural curiosity. This is an engineered sound transmission system. After the catastrophe, massive organs appeared in cathedrals. The official explanation, accompaniment for church services. But historical documents preserve references to instruments of resonance with the heavens. Memory of function remained, understanding was lost. Organ pipes represent a primitive attempt to reproduce what the cathedral's columns and spires once did. The organ is a control panel for a dead system. Keys are pressed, but the actual mechanism was removed long ago. Gothic cathedrals may have performed multiple functions simultaneously. Defense, generating sound barriers around cities, impassable without special protection. Construction, acoustic levitation and stone processing. Energy, converting sound vibrations to electricity through piezoelectric effects. Three purposes in one structure. And this wasn't a standalone installation but part of a global network. All major Gothic temples across Europe are positioned on geomagnetic anomalies, so-called ley lines, planetary energy nodes, points of heightened crustal activity, measure distances between cathedrals along the Rhine. From Cologne to Aachen Cathedral, 68 kilometers. From Aachen to Maastricht, 71. From Maastricht to Brussels, 74. Average value, approximately 70 kilometers. This figure isn't random. 70 kilometers equals half the wavelength of infrasound at roughly 2.5 hertz. Optimal spacing for synchronizing resonators into a unified system. Cathedrals functioned as phased array antennas, transmitting and receiving signals simultaneously. The river served as a conductor. Water excellently transmits low-frequency vibrations, amplifying and directing them. Temples aligned along the waterway not for aesthetic reasons. They formed a chain, an energy highway, an information channel, a defensive barrier. Star fortresses once surrounded every cathedral. Cologne's fortifications were demolished in the 19th century, officially because the expanding city needed room. But the multi-pointed configuration of these fortresses was never optimal for defense. Complex geometry creates dead zones and complicates garrison management. However, this configuration is ideal from a wave physics perspective. The star shape generates standing waves, concentrates energy, directs it from perimeter to center E to the cathedral. The fortress amplified acoustic signals. The river transmitted them to the next node. The chain of Gothic temples along the Great River isn't an architectural trend. It's an engineered highway for wireless energy and information transmission across hundreds of kilometers. At Cologne Cathedral's heart rests an object called the Shrine of the Three Magi. Official legend states it contains relics of the wise kings who traveled from the east to honor the infant Jesus. The relic arrived from Milan in 1164 and remains the temple's primary treasure. Examine the artifact's dimensions: 220 centimeters long, 110 wide, 153 tall. Gold mass exceeds 300 kilograms of pure metal. Why so much for storing 3 people's remains? Even assuming large body frames, bones wouldn't occupy a tenth of this volume. The construction is multi-layered. Gold plates alternate with enamel layers, precious stones and settings, relief figures, ornaments, inscriptions. Complex structure following specific logic. Gold is an excellent electrical conductor. Enamel is a dielectric insulator. Conductor, then insulator, then conductor again. This isn't random material selection. This is the classic schematic of a capacitor, a device for accumulating and storing electrical charge. The shrine isn't positioned against a wall or in a side chapel. It occupies the cathedral's geometric center, the point of maximum acoustic energy focus. When the building operated as a resonator, Sound vibrations created mechanical stress in the stone's crystal structure. The piezoelectric effect, mechanical pressure converting to electrical charge. This charge flowed through structural elements to the central point, accumulated in the golden shrine, then transmitted onward through the cathedral network. Wireless energy via resonance, the technology Nikola Tesla dreamed of, apparently existing long before his birth. Images of the shrine survive from different eras. An engraving from 1671 shows a specific set of figures. A lithograph from 1781 shows a different set. New elements appearing, old ones vanishing. A six-pointed Star of David appears on the surface. A Christian cross is added. In the 21st century, the Star of David has disappeared. Precious stones occupy its place. More than half the gold figures documented in images from past centuries are gone. Official explanations are predictable, stolen, damaged during transport, removed for restoration. But access to this great relic was always strictly controlled. No random person could approach. Changes were made deliberately by those with authority. On an ancient 10th century stained glass window, a female figure is clearly visible among the magi, open neckline, soft facial features. On the shrine itself, the third figure is also depicted beardless, with feminine appearance. But the 19th century sculptural group behind the shrine presents all three as men. Why was the woman concealed? Because she didn't fit the new historical version. Three male magi kings from the east, understandable, aligned with church canon, but a queen, a female magus, that's an entirely different narrative. The history of a civilization where women held equal standing. Examine the earliest photograph of Cologne Cathedral, dated 1855. The cathedral stands without its western towers, where today two gigantic spires rise 157 meters tall. There's empty space. The building's most recognizable feature, reproduced on every postcard and tourist brochure, was constructed in the 19th century. Official chronology states work began in 1842. The photograph was taken 13 years later. By the time of the shot, only the foundation had been raised. The western facade was fully completed by 1880, 38 years total. Now compare with the overall construction history. The first phase allegedly continued from 1248 to 1437, 189 years of continuous work. Then came a break. For 405 years, the cathedral stood unfinished, without roofing over portions of the structure, without security, without maintenance. 4 centuries during which nobody dismantled it for stone or looted its precious fixtures. Then in the 19th century, original blueprints mysteriously appear, having supposedly lain somewhere for 600 years. And in 38 years, the western facade rises, the most complex, tallest, most detailed section of the entire complex. 38 years accomplishing more than 189. The arithmetic doesn't work. The two western facade towers are perfectly symmetrical. Distance between them approximately 60 meters. This equals half the wavelength of infrasound at a specific frequency. Two structures at this spacing form a dipole, a directional antenna, tower form, narrow vertical cones with lattice structure. The stone lacework creates a waveguide type grid. Sound waves rise from below, focus, amplify. Atop each tower, a sharp spire with a gilded metal cross. Gold doesn't oxidize and conducts electricity excellently. The cross shape corresponds to a T-antenna schematic with capacitive loading. Inside the towers hang massive bells, officially for summoning the faithful. But documents contain strange references to ringing prohibitions, periods when bells remain silent for decades. A bell's function in such a system, resonator, a heavy metal object suspended in a narrow vertical channel. When cathedral walls vibrate at specific frequencies, the bell enters resonance, amplifies oscillations, creates standing waves. Energy concentrates and exits through the spire. These towers were destroyed during the catastrophe. As the tallest and most vulnerable elements, they suffered first from shock waves or seismic activity. That's why the 1855 photograph shows nothing there. In the 19th century, the external form was restored. The style replicated, but function was not recovered because it wasn't understood. They created an imitation for early cameras. Across Europe, a wave of restorations unfolds. Cologne Cathedral, Notre Dame de Paris, Westminster Abbey, temples throughout Italy and Spain. Everywhere the same scenario, ancient plans suddenly discovered, massive construction launched, enormous budgets allocated. When the confrontation with Tartaria began, the energy network was destroyed first. Without energy, the empire weakened. Without communication, it fragmented. Without defensive barriers, its territories fell to conquest. Cologne Cathedral survived because it was captured early, it was neutralized, equipment was removed, it was repurposed as a Christian temple. The remaining cathedrals along the Rhine were either completely destroyed or converted into picturesque ruins. The system was switched off. The empire fell, not to external enemies, but from losing its technological superiority. In the 19th century, evidence cleanup began. History was rewritten. The legend of the Dark Ages was invented. Construction blueprints were forged. Artifact symbolism was altered. Everything pointing to the true creators was eliminated. They left us the stone but took the knowledge. We walk through these structures like museums, admiring architecture, listening to stories of saints and miracles, never realizing that beneath our feet are power stations, in the walls are capacitors, in the spires are antennas. We live among technologies for which the instruction manual was lost. Consider what happened to the technologies of the past. We're conditioned to believe progress moves linearly, from simple to complex, primitive to advanced. Each generation knows more than the last. Every century surpasses its predecessor. But what if this picture is false? What if humanity already reached heights we can't imagine, then slid into oblivion? Look at Baalbek in Lebanon. Stone blocks weighing 1,000 tons each. Modern cranes cannot lift such loads. We don't know how it was done. Look at the Giza pyramids. Millions of blocks fitted with sub-millimeter precision. The official version proposes copper tools and wooden rollers. Seriously? The Antikythera mechanism was found on the Aegean seabed, a sophisticated astronomical computer created 2,000 years ago. Humanity needed 1,500 years to reinvent it. Where did it come from? How did it appear, and why did it vanish? The Baghdad battery, a clay vessel with a copper cylinder and iron rod. Add acid and you get electrical current. The artifact is over 2,000 years old. Why would ancients need electricity? Official science shrugs and changes the subject. Damascus steel, whose secret is lost. Greek fire, whose formula is forgotten. Roman concrete, which we cannot replicate. Technologies disappear. Knowledge evaporates. Entire layers of history sink into oblivion. Now imagine a catastrophe capable of erasing memory of an entire civilization. Not an individual invention, not a single secret, an entire knowledge system, an entire infrastructure, an entire technological order. This is exactly what happened to Tartaria. The war wasn't fought only with weapons, it was fought with information. Victors rewrote chronicles, destroyed archives, substituted artifacts. Those who control the past control the future. Those who control the present control the past. This formula works flawlessly. Notice the synchronicity of 19th century events. Strange things happen simultaneously worldwide. In Europe, a wave of ancient cathedral restorations begins. In Russia, hundreds of churches and monasteries are demolished. In America, cities with Gothic architecture suddenly appear, supposedly built within decades. In Asia and Africa, colonial powers methodically destroy local shrines. Random coincidence? Or a coordinated operation to clean up traces of a previous civilization? Photography arrives at the perfect moment. Now reality can be fixed, creating an evidence base for the new history. Look, here's the cathedral in an 1855 photograph, still under construction. Therefore, it really was built in the 19th century. Therefore, official chronology is correct. Therefore, Tartaria never existed. But photography only captures a moment. It doesn't show what came before. It doesn't explain why the building looks this way. It doesn't answer where 600-year-old blueprints came from that supposedly guided construction. Archives burned with remarkable regularity. Libraries were destroyed under strange circumstances. Museum collections were reshuffled. Exhibits disappeared and reappeared with different labels. Someone was very thoroughly covering tracks. Languages changed. Alphabets were reformed. Old books became unreadable to new generations. The chain of time was deliberately and systematically broken. Look at 18th century maps. Tartaria is marked as Eurasia's largest state. Capital, Tobolsk, borders stretching from the Urals to the Pacific, from the Arctic to China. This isn't conspiracy theory invention. These are official European maps published by authoritative cartographers. Now open any modern history textbook. Tartaria doesn't exist. It simply isn't there. As if someone took an eraser and wiped away an entire empire with hundreds of cities, millions of inhabitants, its own culture and technologies. Where did the people go? Where did the cities vanish? What happened to architecture that doesn't fit official chronology? Answers lie beneath clay layers, under foundations of modern buildings, in basements that somehow extend 5 or 6 stories down, in first-floor windows buried to their lintels in earth. Siberian cities stand on cultural layers several meters thick. Omsk, Tomsk, Tyumen, everywhere the same picture. Excavations reveal paved streets, building remnants, household objects, all located significantly below current ground level. All buried under uniform soil showing no signs of gradual accumulation. The official version stays silent or offers explanations that don't withstand scrutiny. Floods, fires, natural cultural layer buildup. But floods don't bury cities under even clay layers. Fires don't enter buildings underground. Cultural layers form over centuries and contain organic matter, garbage, traces of human activity, not clean soil. Something happened. Something massive, catastrophic, global. And that something was carefully erased from history. Cologne Cathedral is one of the few witnesses that couldn't be completely destroyed or hidden. Too large, too visible, too durable. Easier to capture and repurpose than to level, but even in this form, it continues to speak. Through its proportions, its positioning, its structure. You just need to learn how to listen. The cathedral is silent. They made it silent. But the form remains. The proportions endure. The location hasn't changed. Physical laws still apply. 70 kilometers between temples is still half an infrasound wavelength. The golden shrine is still a capacitor. The spires are still waveguides. Stone remembers. Even if we've forgotten. I'm not claiming everything presented here is absolute truth. My purpose is to lay out facts that typically stay off camera, building dimensions, distances between cathedrals, inconsistencies in official chronology, archaeological anomalies. All of this exists regardless of interpretation. Stone doesn't lie. Mathematics doesn't bend to ideology. Physics works identically across all eras. I'm simply connecting dots that sit in plain sight, dots we've been trained not to notice. What you do with this information is your choice. Think bigger, but ask the questions. Don't accept on faith my words or textbook passages. Compare sources, seek contradictions. Pay attention to what doesn't fit the clean narrative. Truth doesn't lie on the surface, ready and packaged. It hides in details that don't match the pretty legend. Sometimes a single uncomfortable question is enough to crack the official construction. Subscribe to the channel. More investigations and discoveries ahead. We'll continue exploring what mainstream science prefers to avoid. Because truth is always nearby, you just have to want to see it.